Hello.
Good afternoon, everybody. We'll be starting the WebEx in 5 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be starting the WebEx in 4 minutes. The WebEx will start in approximately 1 minute. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the ITogether webinar on targeted cybercrime and the impact on your brand. My name is Jonathan Hurst, and I'm one of the founding partners of ITogether, formerly known as Network Integration Technologies. That was a bit of a mouthful, so we decided to rebrand. This is a highly pertinent webinar that's taking place today, when recently the Council of Europe decided on Friday that there would be tough penalties levied on European Union businesses that did not follow stringent anti-cybercrime policies. We're delighted to be working in partnership with Cisco on this groundbreaking webinar and have attracted 3 great speakers with fantastic credentials. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Paul King. Paul is Senior Security Advisor in Cisco's Corporate Security Programs Organization. That's a bit of a mouthful, so we'll just call it CSPO. Paul advises on a wide range of security matters and represents Cisco at the Home Office and law enforcement agencies. We're delighted he's agreed to talk at our webinar. Morgan Lloyd, also from Cisco, he runs the security business for their public sector segment. He's worked in technology for the past 18 years, being involved in the internet technologies from their formative years. Since joining Cisco, Morgan has been advising some of their largest customers on good security practice and is heavily involved in Cisco's public services network activities. And finally, our speaker from a brand perspective is Martin O'Toole. Martin has 15 years experience in media and through-the-line agencies, managing the client acquisition and creative strategy process. Martin is now Managing Director and co-founder of McGrath O'Toole, a brand revival agency. Martin's also an expert guest blogger on the online portal Smart Insights. Before we start the webinar, if you have any questions, then please email them to hello@itogether.co.uk, and we'll do our best, if possible, to incorporate them in the discussions that the speakers are having. So, I'll now pass you over to Paul King, and would like to welcome him to the webinar.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks very much. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul King. I'm a security advisor at Cisco, and I'm going to do a short presentation today to give you an intro to Cisco's view of security. I'm just going to wait for them to pass the ball over to me so that I can show you the slides, because I need to be presenter. Thank you very much. So hopefully now you can all see the slides. Now, I've called this short presentation, "Do you know what you know you don't know?" I wasn't trying to invent a new tongue twister, but the premise of what I wanted to try and get over today is that organizations first need to start down this path of working out what risks they're taking and then decide whether they're happy with the level of risk. So in other words, I'm not trying to suggest how you can totally secure your organization. That might be a laudable end goal. What I'm suggesting you start by doing is seeing what shape you think you're in, and also whether you're happy with that level of risk. And that's why I've phrased it, do you know what you don't know? And the best way I can sort of summarize that is, if I were to go to your CEO or your CIO or your Chief Security Officer, whoever, and if I were to go and say, how many sophisticated targeted attacks have you seen? in most cases, quite often, the reply will be none. And the big question at that point is the person saying none because they didn't notice? Are they saying none because they didn't look? Are they saying none because they've got superb security? Are they saying none because nobody'd ever want to attack them? I don't know the answer to any of those, and there isn't a right or wrong answer. So what I'm going to do in the next few slides is try and using some of the things we do here at Cisco as an example, talk through how we approach that sort of high-level position in terms of accepting risk. I am definitely not suggesting we are doing everything right. That is definitely not the point. And even if you find some of the views that I'm presenting here, you don't agree with the risks we're taking, there isn't any right or wrong on this risk question. It's purely, do you accept the risk? Do you know what the risk is? Do you accept the risk? That's not right or wrong. And I want to keep saying that. Just because you're not doing what we do doesn't mean you're wrong. You just might have a different risk appetite to us. The best example, if you want to sort of bring that into your personal sphere, as an analogy, is if we were to talk about insurance, say, on our house or on our holiday or on our contents, any sort of insurance that we personally take out. We will all have different views on how much insurance cover we want to pay for. It's not that any one of us is wrong, but we've just got a different appetite. So, for instance, I might have a house, and my level of risk appetite might say, actually, do you know what? I'd like to put a burglar alarm in. Okay, so I'll put a burglar alarm in. By the way, I'm assuming you've already got windows and doors, and you've put a lock on the door. So I'm going to put an alarm in. That gives me the level of security that I think is okay. Now, some people might say, do you know what? I'd like to put window locks on all the downstairs windows. And some people might say, actually, I want windows locks on all my windows. And some other people might say, do you know, I'd really like a loud, barking dog, and so on and so on and so on. At what point do you sit in your house with the fortress that you've built around you, and do you think that you're happy with the level of risk? And that's exactly the same sort of scenario that I'm trying to say we should take in corporate scenario, in the corporate sense. But to do that, we've got to understand the risk. So the next slide then, and this is this next slide is something for you as an organization to ask yourselves. Here is the network 20 years ago. This would have probably been an IBM mainframe over on the right-hand side. And we would have had, we used to call them 3745s, front-end processors, FETs. 3745s, we might have been using X25, if anybody on the call can remember X25. And we might even have had things like NIPSI, and we'd have had VTAM, and we'd have had RACF. And if you wanted to connect to my network 20 years ago, you would have to have asked me, and I would have connected you to my network. And then today's network is more like this. And the question for your organization is, do you think that this is fantastic and this is brilliant for your customers, this is brilliant for your employees, and you love the idea of this network anytime, any place, anywhere? Or does your organization think, oh my goodness, look at that, it's horrific. If we let people on there, they'll only go and hurt themselves. I'm being facetious on the two extremes, but you understand that what I'm trying to say is you need to understand whether that's good for your organization or whether you think that's bad for your organization. And the reason that's important is it's going to depend on your security. Because if you think that this is bad, this picture, then you are going to ask the security team to make sure nobody can get on there. You're going to ask the security team to block, to lock, to ban, and to stop. If you think that this is fantastic, then you're going to ask the security team to let you do these things. In other words, to enable the business and say, how can I do wireless securely? How can I do wireless securely? Or please tell me how to ban wireless. Again, I know I'm being extreme in those two examples, but honestly, there are customers who think wireless is fantastic, and there are customers who don't think wireless is secure. So I'm not trying to say that's right or wrong, that's just a risk appetite. So we go on to the next slide. What is actual risk? So just to make sure we're talking at the right level, vulnerability. Remember the test I give Cisco employees when they're thinking about this for customers is try to imagine you're talking to John Chambers, who's our CEO, and imagine what you're going to talk to him about when you give him a briefing. And so vulnerability is going to be a weakness in a process, it's going to be a weakness in a system, it's going to be a weakness somehow procedurally probably. It is not going to be a bug in some code. So at the level I'm talking here, this isn't a bug in, say, Adobe. This isn't a bug in, say, some a spreadsheet package. This is more likely to be that we've got some problem in terms of our procedure or our process. If we move on to the next one, which is to say, what are we trying to protect? This is probably the hardest question for most organizations. What are you trying to protect? What's at risk? What would you like me to look after? And if you don't get this bit right, you can't do some of the later things about checking whether you're spending the money in the right way. I would suggest to you that a better way, if you struggle with what are you trying to protect, is to turn it this way, which is to say, what is the impact on your company? So what would take your company out of business altogether? What would make you go bust? What would cause you to lose your, decrease your share price by 10%? What would cause you to lose a big bid that you've got coming up against a very aggressive competitor? These are impacts, and from the impacts you will then maybe find out what the asset is. To make up an example for you, let's suppose you're going to announce your results, and let's suppose something happened to your financial system that would cause a big impact to your company. Therefore, you would say that your financial system is an asset that you need to protect. And when I say protect, I don't just mean confidentiality. A lot of people get hung up on confidentiality of information. That is important, but there are two other things that are also important. The integrity of the information, in other words, can you trust it? Is it what you think it is? And then secondly, the availability of the information. In other words, can I actually get the information I need when I need it? Unfortunately, those have an acronym, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The acronym is CIA, which some people might say is a bit spooky. Moving on to the next thing, and this is the hardest thing, which is threat. Who is going to attack me? It's all very well coming up with these mysterious impacts and people trying to do things, but who's going to do it? And I would offer that there is one threat that everybody should consider. To have a threat, you need to have a motivation, so somebody needs to be motivated to attack. We then need to have the capability, so somebody has to have the capability to attack. And then finally, we need to have the opportunity. In other words, they can get there to do the attack. So if all three exist, so that's the motivation, the opportunity, and the capability, then you've got a threat. And I would suggest to most people on this call that the threat for them is money. So the motivation is money. Somehow, I bet your organization has the opportunity for me to make money, either by stealing your information, or by stealing your customer credit cards, or somehow I bet there is a motivation around money, and that means there is probably a threat. Now here's the hard part. What's the likelihood? Don't know, I can't give you that information on the phone doing a WebEx like this, but that's the tricky part, and that's the bit where you accept the risk. Okay, so I'll just leave that up there to work out. So from here, your organization should know what assets you're protecting, maybe deciding it through the impact analysis. Then you know what the risks are and you accept the risks. So remember what I said, not try and get rid of them, you accept them. Here at Cisco, we allow our employees to use iPads, iPhones, laptops, they can use almost any device they like. Going forward next year, this year, it's going to be even wider than that. Is there no risk attached? No, that's not true. There are some risks, but we accept the risks, and actually we work to mitigate or to manage the risk. We're not trying to say zero risk. Threats, we could do a lot more on this, and I think one of the later speakers is going to cover this. So I would just highlight that really we're right up in the sophisticated top end now, I would say, in terms of risk. The people, if you have financial information, if you have information around customers, if you've got credit cards, if you're bidding against an aggressive competitor, I think you will have threats. And there will be people somewhere who will have the skills to do it if they want. In our security team, at a high level, these are some of the objectives we have. And I want to be really clear that these are the security objectives, but overall, to our business, the job of the security team is to say yes. So the main thing we try to do is to say yes. Ours is not a job of saying no. And that's quite important in an organization, because we, therefore, as the security team, are seen as a benefit. We're seen as an enabler, as opposed to the team that comes around and says, no, you can't have the admin rights on your laptop, no, you can't have any wireless, no, you can't work from home, no, you can't have VPN. And again, I realize I'm being very facetious in my polarized views there, but I'm trying to get over how we can have those two approaches to security, and it's quite important. So we're trying to keep the bad stuff out, we're trying to keep up services running. We need to be able to see what we're doing. We need to see what's happening, and that's an important part of the stuff I do. What do we have here at Cisco? Always on, lots of money. I'm going to skip through that. Getting on to personnel, because this is an area that's often overlooked. So who owns the security policy in your company? That's a rhetorical question for you all to ask yourselves. If I said to you, who owns your security policy, can you in one sentence tell me the answer? In Cisco, it's the Chief Executive Officer, the CEO, it's John Chambers. So it's really quite simple for us. John Chambers, the CEO, says, it's all down to you, the individual, and it's mandatory. That's fantastic. We're lucky to have that as the position in our security policy. We have users, arguably there are, some people might say they're the problem. I wouldn't agree with that. And in fact, they're our greatest asset. And what I mean by this is that we've found at Cisco that if we explain the security risks to people, and if we explain to them what we would like them to do to keep Cisco safe, actually they are very proactive at taking the steps to protect Cisco. And that was something that we've understood a few years back, and we spend a lot of time and money training our people, training our staff to understand what the risks are and to be safe, to keep Cisco safe. And we've got great success on that. So I bring that up to your attention, to treat the employees as somebody who's trying to keep you safe if you just give them the tools to do it and explain how to do it. Moving on to some really practical things, because I need to stop talking shortly. At Cisco, we traditionally allow our users to do anything. So in other words, if you're on the Cisco network, you can browse to any website you like. We traditionally didn't do any blocking of URLs based on content. We personally don't have that risk appetite. Is it right or wrong? I'm not going to draw a conclusion on that. We accept the risk. However, what changed over the years, and it's shown in the picture down in the bottom left, is that there is more and more malware coming in, not through email, so not through the traditional email attachment and so on, but actually through what we call drive-by or web attack. And because of the problems of attacks coming in through websites, we've actually changed and added some extra function. So when I say traditional practice is losing its effectiveness, what I'm saying here is we patch, mandatory. We have AV, up to date. We have some heuristics, and yet there will still be malware that will work, and therefore we have to accept that that's the case. So what we've done at Cisco is we've used our own IronPort product, the Web Security Appliance, WSA, and we now proxy every single HTTP connection out of Cisco, and we do it not for content, we do it entirely for malware. So we still don't block anybody based on the content they're going to. We block it only on malware. And we have blocked millions and millions of infected pages. It's been a huge success and drastically brought down the attack vectors that can be used against us. So that's another slide showing that same thing. So this is getting towards the final part of the slides now. And what I'm trying to say on this slide is that you should make sure that you not only collect logs, which is the C part, but you also analyze them. So that's the do you know what you don't know? Have you looked at your log files to check whether anyone has done a certain type of attack against you? Because only at that point can you say whether or not you are happy with your level of risk. So that's really important. The second part that comes out from this slide is that you should measure the effectiveness of your security solutions that you put in. If you've put in antivirus, how many viruses are you stopping? How many viruses are you missing? So that sort of feedback loop to measure the success is very important. So, final slide then. Always question what you're doing, and these are directly from the Chief Security Officer at Cisco, who is my boss. So always question what we're doing. Always check that what you're doing still is valid. Stop asking for the best practices and start saying what is effective and how effective is it. So again, very important to do that because you've got to measure whether you're being successful or not. What can I see? What don't I know? What can't you see? Are you missing some log files? Are you missing some data? Rather importantly, that you go and get it. What can I shamelessly copy? Share best practice. We at Cisco are more than willing to share best practice. Ultimately, if somebody's got some good ideas on a particular attack profile, then we'll certainly take it. And at that point, I put that slide in because I just think it's quite a cool slide. So we've got to try and be good all the time. They just have to get in once. At that point, I will finish and I will pass over to Morgan. Just a sec.
Thank you very much for that, Paul. I believe now we're passing over to Morgan Lloyd.
Yeah, I'm just going to pass that over to Morgan, if I can find him. There he is. Done.
Over to you, Morgan.
So it's always interesting. So yes, further to the introduction earlier, it's Morgan Lloyd here. I look after the security business for Cisco's public sector customers. And as you can imagine, you know, with so much going on in the world of security, public sector is particularly under quite a lot of target at the moment. So it keeps us quite busy. So I was really asked to do a few slides around, you know, Cisco's view of the world, some of the products and technologies that we've got to help build out a solid security fabric, as it were. I didn't really want to bore people with sort of long presentations around firewalls and talk about sort of marketing-based architectures. But what I thought might be helpful is talk about Cisco's security intelligence operations, our SIO. And to my mind, it's one of the best kept secrets, really. We don't talk enough about this with our partners and certainly not with our customers. But it's very important when we're looking at security because it underpins all of our security products and really offers a great sort of defense in depth, if you like. And certainly when we look at how threats are evolving, it really enables us to be at the forefront of preventing these malware attacks and helping to prevent these advanced persistent threats and other threats that we see. So what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes just talking through SIO, and so everybody can get a good feel for some of the things that we do. Okay, so jumping through there. So essentially what SIO brings to the table for Cisco security products is that it gives us more context as to what's happening. So when we're looking at email security or web security or firewalling or IPS signatures, it enables us to bring additional information into the decision making of, is this good, is this bad? So it gives us this context. For example, when we're looking at email and web, we can look at things like, when was the domain name registered? If it's a sending email server, we can look at things like, if it's a dynamic IP address. Even if the content appears legitimate, we can look at other things like the domain owner and where that particular server happens to be hosted. So there's a whole series of other parameters that we take in, but it really helps us give a context to the decisions that the products make around security. So SIO itself is a cloud-driven service that feeds into our products. Fundamentally, it's based around three pillars: sensor base, the threat operations center, and then the dynamic updates that are produced from that. So if we take a moment just to look at what sensor base gives us, an example here is that we have our SIO at the top, so there's the three pillars we just spoke around. And at the bottom, we've got a few things happening at customer sites. So starting from the bottom left, for example, here there's an ad agency in London. Their email security device detects a new spammer coming out, so they'll log that as a new spammer and feed that information back up to sensor base. 3 minutes past 8, we've got an ISP data center in Moscow, and one of our web security appliances, and these are the IronPort appliances that we use here at Cisco, detects a new botnet. So again, that will log that information, feed that back up to SIO. 7 minutes past 8, we've got a bank in Chicago, and the IPS there is detecting a new hacker trying to probe that network. So it logs the IP address and feeds it back up to SIO. Now, what SIO does is take that information, add some intelligence around it, and then pushes information back out to all of the other Cisco appliances. So by 10 past 8 in the morning, all of our customers globally that use email, web, and IPS instantly have a new set of instructions around, this is a bad IP address, this is a bad website, this is a bad spam server. So we're able to react, very, very quickly to new things, new threats that are happening. SIO is often referred to as a credit reference agency on the Internet. So we collect 200 parameters on virtually every routable IP address on the Internet, and that really feeds into our products. So some numbers around SIO, and some of these are really staggering when you get into the real depth. So on the sensor-based side of things, we're receiving over 1 terabyte of data every single day. If you look at the number of Cisco appliances out, the number there is 700,000. The more recent figures I've seen are upwards of 900,000 individual sensors around the world who are constantly feeding information back up into SIO and, of course, receiving information pushed back down. From a web security perspective, as Paul mentioned, we've got our IronPort appliances. We also have the Cisco ScanSafe service, which is a cloud-based web security service. And across those products, we process over 20 billion individual web requests every single day. If we look on the email side of things, we're processing more than 1/3 of the world's global volume of email messages, and that's way upwards of 100 million email messages. And every single time we process a web request or we process an email, we're looking at, as I said before, 200 separate parameters on every single IP address. So we're very quick to react if there's a compromised website. We're very quick to react to updating our web appliances. When a new spammer or a new hacker comes up, we're very quick to react and actually push those rules out. Now, here's an example of how this might work in action. So if we take, for example, a customer that doesn't have any of the Cisco technologies here, This is often how the advanced persistent threat or very targeted attacks are launched. So it could start with a phishing email, or as Paul was alluding to earlier, it could be a drive-by scareware web attack. But in this case, we've got a phishing email coming in, which has got a malicious link within that email. Now, if it's a new spammer or a new phisher or coming from a new IP address, then most anti-spam and email protection devices are not going to recognize it as a threat because they have no information about it. So it's highly likely that that email is going to be led into the organization. So that will go to the user. In this case, it's a football website, and football is notorious for being compromised and delivering out malware. So in this case, the user clicks on the link. On the email here, it's just written as an IP address, but that could quite easily be obfuscated, so it looks like a LinkedIn request or a Facebook request, and certainly there's some high-profile attacks that have been launched in that manner. They click on the link, it takes them to a malware site. So again, this could be a relatively new malware site, so their existing web security product hasn't seen it before, doesn't know anything about it, so potentially that malware could then be infected onto that machine. So the laptop's been compromised. It could be harvesting passwords, any number of bits of information, and then quite feasibly feeding that back to the command and control center because the customer's IPS won't have known that that's a bad known IP address. So this is a very, very common attack. Now, if we sort of look at this from a Cisco perspective and how using SIO we can overcome this, we would view that entire attack and we're able to sort of correlate things happening between our products. So, for example, the email comes in, and again, you know, if it's a new sender that we haven't seen, we could conceivably let that link in. But what we will do is, firstly, we'll take that URL or IP address that we've got, and we will run it through our IP reputation database. Do we know anything about this? If we know it as a malware server, we won't let the user go, and we'll just, you know, we'll delete that email and log that email sender as being bad. Let's say, for example, that we haven't seen that IP address before. User clicks on it. What we'll actually do, though, before that email is let into the organization, we will add a small redirect to the front of it. So the first time a user clicks on the link, we'll automatically redirect him through our ScanSafe web security service in the cloud, and then as the page comes back, we'll then perform some very in-depth analysis, deep heuristic scanning, and recognize pretty quickly that it's malware. So we'll block the site. What we'll also do is tell our email servers that anyone sending this IP address or sending from this IP address is bad, and we can also update the IPS sensors to say that if you've got any machines on your network attempting to phone home or attempting to send information to this IP address, then to block them as well. So it's a fairly sophisticated way of overcoming particularly these zero-day threats or these new attacks that we see coming out. Okay, the next pillar of SIO, excuse me, the slide's jumping forward quite quickly. So the next pillar of SIO is the Threat Operations Center. This is the clever guys that sit in our cloud data centers, and we've got data centers all around the world that process this kind of information. So again, to put some big numbers around it, we've got 500 staff full-time looking at this, 80 of which are PhD or very heavily accredited Cisco engineers. They're dealing in 40-plus languages. Again, this is often something that's not seen when you've got threats coming in from different countries with different language. That can often be a barrier for products, but we've got multiple language support. And this is an operations center that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And so far, Cisco have invested over $100 million in this. So, you know, that gives you an idea of the scale of the operation. And really what these people are looking is to build out more intelligence about threats that we're seeing, see how the threat landscape is changing. They're helping you know, investigate new breakouts that we're seeing and help us write very accurate rules and advanced mitigation techniques that are then pushed out to our products. So the final element we've got is the dynamic updates. This is the stuff that's produced from SIO and pushed down to our products. We're currently tracking well over 40,000 different vulnerabilities. So this could be, you know, Cisco or Microsoft or Oracle or SAP announced vulnerabilities. We're tracking those. For IPS alone, we're producing over 3,000 separate signatures. So these guys are processing out over 500 gigabytes of data just to produce these rules. And that results across all of our products in over 8 million rules every single day. And again, we're talking about those 200 different parameters that we check. So in essence then, at the top, we've got our SIO, which is our cloud-driven analysis system. It's looking at reputation, it's updating signatures, creating rule sets, which are then pushed down into filters for IPS or email or web or firewalls, and then pushed down then to increase the accuracy of our on-premise appliances. When we look into email, we've mentioned before it's over a third of the world's global volume of email traffic, and by having this holistic view, we're able to get an edge on the competition when it comes to new virus outbreaks, typically about 13 hours. Now, we actually publish these on our website. If you search for the Threat Operations Center, or TOC, on the Cisco website, when we find a new virus or a new outbreak, we'll actually publish when we see it, and then we stack rank and show how long it takes other people in our industry to catch up with us. So there's always a good edge on email viruses. Same on web. We've already spoken about all the URLs that we monitor. That's over 4 million blocked websites every single day. When it comes to IPS, because we're also using this global correlation, this SIO database, typically in terms of real-time protection, we find it 100 times faster than a traditional signature-driven IPS system. And we've got very extensive Cisco vulnerability coverage. So when we identify vulnerabilities in Microsoft or Oracle or any of the sort of well-known applications, we're able to push out rules very, very quickly. And lastly, on the firewall, again, this benefits from the SIO rule sets. So we also offer complete traffic control. So the firewalls can be configured in a way where it's not just outbound web traffic that comes under inspection. We're actually scanning all ports, all protocols, looking for all kinds of threats coming in, and we get a good view on where the bad guys are sitting, so we can monitor traffic being destined out for those. So that really just sums up SIO. As I said, this does underpin all of our email, all of our web, all of our ASA firewall, and all of our IPS products. And it does go some way to answer the why Cisco approach when it comes to security. So that's it from me. That's really just what I wanted to go through. So I shall now hand you over to
Martin O'Toole.
All right, there you go, Martin. That should be coming over.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, bear with me. Right. Okay. I've been asked to talk about the impact on brand of cybercrime, and I guess I'm acutely aware of my audience today and how I need to make a point of getting right to the sort of tangible features of brand pretty quick on. So because I guess there is a perception that brand and branding can be quite intangible / fluffy marketing stuff. So I'm going to sort of talk about what a brand's made of, what the components are of a brand. I'm going to talk about something called brand equity, and I'm going to talk about brand value, which is primarily what you'll be most interested in relation to how brand value can be calculated and how it can be affected by cybercrime. Worthwhile me briefly showing you, sorry, I'm in a bit of a freeze here. Okay, worthwhile me briefly just covering off a couple of recent cyber attacks. Very high profile, very big business, and very well covered by the media. So forgive me for telling you things you already know about, but Sony PlayStation in April 2011, 77 million users had their details hacked and stolen. Facebook in January, 45,000 username and passwords hacked and stolen. Not the first hack that Facebook have had in recent months. And I guess more relevantly to the tech industry, RSA, and ironically the security industry. RSA, for those of you who don't know, are a division of EMC Group, and they're all about providing token of authentication solutions to ensure that things like this don't happen. They had a major hack, which I'm going to talk about a little bit further through the presentation. Safe to say it was can open and the worms were everywhere. So what happened? System-wide implications for RSA. Interestingly, from a marketing / PR perspective, similar to Sony, RSA spent a long time not commenting. Of course, with the emergence of social media and you know, online publications, this sort of thing is really risky from a reputation management perspective. These guys just sat very quietly and didn't say a word, whilst the industry and bloggers around the world just continued to speculate. There was a huge decline in product confidence and, of course, brand confidence, as you would expect. Whilst that happened, a mass of authentication solution providers got on the bandwagon with some really risky, sort of edgy campaigns, which you can see all over the place, from print to digital to banners on SC magazine over here, just absolutely having a pop at RSA. The sort of medium to long-term effects were that 760 businesses were affected. Now, when I say businesses, we are really talking about some global enterprises here. We're not talking about SMEs, although I'm sure there was one or two. Notably was Lockheed Martin, a huge US defence contractor, and the ramifications of what happened with their subsequent hacks. I think people are still trying to unravel. So, end result on a practical basis was that RSA had to finally speak up, and one of the first statements they made was to offer to replace all of their tokens. That was 30 to 40 million tokens nationwide. Nationwide? Worldwide. Hello. So, I guess I'm just going to park that question, what was the impact on brand, for a second. You may or may not have seen some of this coverage, and this is an absolute drop in the ocean in terms of some of the features that were featured online. It really wasn't good for them for a long time, and if you Google RSA hack, you'll still see blogs and pieces being written now as the whole thing sort of unravelled. Excuse me. So, I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking to you about what a brand is. I don't want to teach grandma how to suck eggs here, but it's important you understand the context of where I'm coming from here, because I'm not just talking about a mark. A brand is a mark at the end of the day. It's a name, it's a term, a design, a symbol. You know that. What you may not know is that there are a couple of things that we also work very hard towards achieving for our clients. And I don't just mean us, I mean anybody who's reputable in our industry. One of those things is brand equity. What we're trying to do with brand equity is to accrue through marketing some additional benefits or value to a brand. And simply put, brand equity is you either have it or you don't, based on whether or not you've built a brand or invested in a brand, or you haven't built or invested into a brand. It is unequivocally probably the most valuable asset a brand has, and believe it or not, it does hold financial value. And I'm going to explain that a little bit in a minute. But elements include, obviously, our recognition, your recognition of a brand and the mark, the profitability of the business, and of course share price. Again, we're going to talk about that because Paul already hit on share price when he talked about impact, and that's quite a crucial thing to consider. Before we do that, though, I just want to, don't worry, I'm not going to kill you with this diagram. I just want to show you our brand wheel. This is how we would break up a brand and simply demonstrate the components of a brand. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. What I'm going to skip straight to is the values, or you may have heard the term brand pillars. I'm going to talk about some commonly used adjectives in brand value land. I'm actually just going to talk about one, which will come up very frequently in a service or a product brand very often, and it's trustworthiness, it's trust. What I'm trying to get at in a very, very short space of time is one of the brand pillars of a business will often be trust, or a word relating to trust. And in this sort of situation, it goes without saying that trust is shaken as a pillar. Okay, so brand value. What's brand value? You could buy a cup of coffee from the cafe down the road, you could buy a cup of coffee from Costa, you could buy a cup of coffee from Starbucks, and they all have different prices. Now obviously there are various things that make up pricing in the world of marketing, but one of them is brand value. The difference is it's still a cup of coffee, but I'll pay more for my cup of coffee with Starbucks because I get an experience, I get a brand experience. And that is, in a nutshell, brand value, which can, believe it or not, be calculated. And there's no way I'm going to be able to explain that in 5 minutes on this webinar. Suffice to say, there are specialist businesses that do this, consultancies that charge a significant amount of money. And the equation consists of financial statements plus marketing dynamics, and the role of income generation and forecast for the following year. So it's a fairly complex thing, but it can be done. And in the end, businesses can end up with a brand value. So back to RSA. Sadly, I can't talk specifically about the brand value implications because that is, from what I can see, they haven't been published yet. I would imagine they'll be published any day now. What I can tell you, though, interestingly, is RSA, the security division of EMC Group, with a turnover in 2010 of $17 billion, only makes up 4% of the business. Now, I say only, that's 4% of $17 billion. I'm sure that's fairly significant in anybody's book. However, shortly after the Lockheed Martin news, and shortly after the implications were discussed of that, the entire group share price of EMC dropped by 5%. Now, this is what Paul was talking about. This is a direct impact on the business, on the brand of cyber attack. As I say, we can't calculate the value, the brand value now, but I'm sure you will be able to see those figures at some point soon. Ironic, obviously, that this is a security business, and security would, without doubt, be at core of the brand components. So, in 2011, and apologies to be quoting some American statistics here, but I think it's interesting. I would imagine there'll be an awful lot more research done and findings published on brand impact in the UK in the next year or two. It is, as Jonathan pointed out at the beginning of the session, hot topic in Europe now. But what I can share with you is that Experian, who have a division called Data Breach Resolution, recently commissioned a research institute called Ponemon, not to be mistaken with Pokemon, and they did a survey. And the survey was, I think they talked to 843 executives. It was all about cybercrime. And there's some sort of really scary but really tangible figures that I just wanted to share with you quickly. First thing is that on average, any corporation that suffers a breach will have to spend broadly 12 months repairing the reputational damage. Now that's obviously done in numerous ways, notwithstanding just good old-fashioned crisis management PR. In many instances, it's to do with a completely new or sideline marketing plan to go alongside the one that actually directly links with sales. The companies varied from anything from $1 million to $10 billion, with the average being $1.5 billion. This is brand values, by the way, and 82% of them lost sensitive or confidential information. This is the scary stuff, because the brand values in this survey of these businesses dropped anything between 17 to 31% following an incursion, which in anybody's book is scary figures. Cash-wise, that amounted to anything between $184 million and $330 million. So the survey also looked at two different variations of a breach, I guess. One was a highly reported, high-profile breach that was all about data, I guess probably your Facebook would be a good example. With more than 100,000 employee records, for example, would suffer on average a 12% decrease in brand value. And then interestingly, a less covered, smaller theft, but of something more fundamental, such as RSA or with your trade secrets, new product development or source code, something like that, would likely suffer an 18% decrease. So all day long, coverage or no coverage, it's not looking good for brand values. So, in summary, brand impact can be calculated. So for anybody who thinks it can't, think again. Breaches do fundamentally affect the trust that anybody has with a business or a brand, now and in the future. I guess it's also worthwhile pointing out that whilst I'm talking about big, large enterprises, multi-million and billion-dollar enterprises, a breach is a breach is a breach, from SME to any size business, and depending on how close or whether or not trust features into your brand pillars or confidential information features into your service or product provision, you ought to be very concerned about any coverage or any publicity related to a breach, because as I mentioned earlier on, we have this thing called information superhighway and this new fandangle concept called social media, which means that try as hard as you might to keep it quiet, it will very quickly be tweeted, retweeted, liked or probably disliked on Facebook. So my final line, I guess, to leave you with is that anything that can tarnish your brand will have an effect on your bottom line. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Martin. How unusual for a marketeer to go over his allotted time slot.
Sorry.
If you could just pass the control over to me, Martin, thank you.
Yeah. Where are you? There you are. Have you got it?
Okay.
There.
Okay. Right, so, well, thank you very much. Joking aside, Martin, that was very interesting. Equally, thanks very much to Paul King and Morgan Lloyd, and obviously for everybody attending the webinar today. We really appreciate the support that Cisco has provided to us on this webinar. We want to make it clear that the webinar will be available for playback within 48 hours. We're expecting quite a few hits on that for people who've informed us that would love to listen to the webinar but couldn't actually make it on the day. So, finally, thanks very much to all the speakers. Thanks very much to all the attendees, and we look forward to the next event alongside Cisco. Goodbye.